So here we are, another 5-watt diode laser, and in this case it's the longer Ray5, and there are definitely some things to like and of course a few things that could have been done better. So in this video I'll put it together, I'll put it through its paces, I'll show you some output, and we'll see what comes out of this. The good news about this laser, of course, is it's quieter and it comes with goggles. So let's get going. How's it going, everybody? Steve here. Welcome back to my shop. And as I mentioned, today I'm going to look at the longer Ray5. It's a fairly new 5-watt diode laser from Longer. It has some really nice features, some that I haven't seen on other lasers. So what I wanted to do is just show you a bit of the high points on the assembly and you know, the benefits of some of the choices they made in the design. And then we'll do a bunch of the usual testing, and I'll kind of run through some of the things I really like about this laser, and definitely some things I think they could have done better. But at the same time, you know, the short answer here is this is a really nice laser, so let's take a look. All right, so like all of these small diode lasers, the first thing we need to do is take it all out of the box and put it together. And in the case of the Ray5, it's packed, you know, typically well for a diode laser. They tend to pack these things well. You pull it all out of the box. Now it does come with goggles, which is something some of the other lasers don't. And the packaging is well identified, so you know what you need for each step. Now, the first thing we need to do is put the frame together, and in the corners they use these nice steel angle brackets that keep everything at 90 degrees. So you just slide those in and tighten them up, and then on the outside you put the larger screw into the opposing piece of metal, and it creates this amazing tight frame. And then simply slide the X carriage onto the frame and put the feet on. Now there's three plate type feet, and you screw those on in 3 corners, and then you do the front display, which has just 2 screws, and it acts as both the 3rd or 4th leg rather, and also the user interface for the laser, and it screws on really easily. Really the last part here is we put the belts on. Now they come with T-nuts, so you can just slide the belt in and twist that T-nut into the slot and screw it down, and then pull the belt over the pulleys, over the main pulley and underneath the wheels on the rail. And it's a pretty simple operation and a little tedious, as you can see, but you know, it's not too difficult. You just grab the belt and slide it through, and then find something sharp to poke it out of the rail, and then pull it back. And on the back side, pull the belt reasonably tight, and make sure that both belts are the same tension, and then do exactly the same step as we did on the front with the T-nut slid in there. Now after that, it's just a case of plugging the stepper motors in, and in this case there's only one stepper motor for the Y and one for the X-axis, which rides on top of the mount for the laser. So the last step is to put the laser module on, and it just goes on with 2 thumb screws, and that's it. It's a pretty simple setup, and you know, pretty much anyone can do this. It comes with all the wrenches you need, certainly all the hardware, and once you get all the mechanical pieces put together, it's just a case of putting a few zip ties on to hold the cable into the right place so that it doesn't jam on something, and you're ready to go. So now that we got the longer Ray5 built, let's do a quick little walk around here and take a look at how it's put together and what that really means from a quality perspective. So first things first, it's got the usual kind of gradient scales on the side, and unlike some of the others, the 0 here is actually 0, which is nice. Same on the X-axis side, it's pretty close to the edge here. So that aspect is nice. Cable handling in usual fashion for diode lasers is a little dodgy cables tend to flop around, but they don't get in the way, which is nice. Now on the x-axis side, they have the usual rollers, and they hide the belts, which is nice, and that's a general theme here. All the belts are hidden, so that's all nice. Now there's no limit switches on this, so that's not a huge deal. I actually don't mind it on this laser. On the O'Farrell laser too, I actually kind of missed it. It seems more awkward to not have it there for some reason, and I think it's got to do with homing the laser. Here you plug this into something like Lightburn and it just starts where you have it positioned, which is nice. The laser module itself is the standard fare. Now, maybe this is one place for concern. What I don't like is the focusing is a little floppy. It seems a little imprecise. It just uses these 2 thumb screws. And for focusing, what they have is this metal ingot that fits in the back. And if I turn the laser around here, you'll see that there's this little notch in the back of the laser module. And the way you focus is you drop the laser down onto that and then tighten it up and it's in focus. It's a nice idea in principle, but in practice, it's behind the laser. So if you have your laser in a normal orientation like this, when it comes time to try and focus, then you're poking the thing in behind. And if your laser is mounted somewhere in a box, it becomes a bit of a challenge. But nicely put together laser. Now on the front side we have a nice display, and power switch is up front in a good spot, SD card. My usual complaint about the USB cable, they make it plug in on the top, and if I plug this in, again, you can see there's just not a nice place to put the cable where it doesn't get in the way. So anyway, it's just something that I wish they would put them on the side, but it works. It's at least they put the power on the side. Now, as far as powering up, as I mentioned in the lead-in, it's pretty quiet laser. So on the display here, they have the usual kind of controls. You can certainly move the laser around, and you can hear it moving there. Navigation's pretty simple. You can do a home. Now, the one thing that's nice about this laser over most of the other diode lasers is this laser actually has Wi-Fi, and it's typically a case of picking your Wi-Fi network, entering the password, and when it connects, it'll give you, in this case, it'll show you the signal strength and the IP address so that you can connect to this directly. I'll show you a little bit of the web side of this. Basically, what they've done is build a web server into this box, so you can talk to this laser from a web browser. So that's actually pretty nice. The user experience here is actually really nice. What isn't quite as nice, if I just made a general complaint, is if I reconnect to my network, you can see this keyboard is really small. So typing your password in here can be a bit of a challenge, but it's not so bad. What I did was just take a metal tool and push it. This is touch sensitive, not capacitive, so you actually have to press things to make them take effect. So you can use literally anything to press it, which is okay. If you have fat fingers like I do, you can still get your password entered there. Anyway, that's the front panel control. It's really nice. Now, having said that, it's not something I would use normally. I tend to work on my designs in a graphics tool and then load them into the laser using something like Lightburn, or you can also use LaserGRBL. But you know, if you do put your images on an SD card, it's a nice way to do it if you don't want to have it attached to a computer. Okay, so let's dig into this Wi-Fi feature a bit more. I showed you that the laser will get an IP address when you configure it. And what I did was fire up a browser and go to that IP address. And if you aren't a network person, it doesn't really matter. All you need to do is look at that number. In my case, it was this 192.168.2.73 number, and just stick it into the line on your browser. And what you'll get is a connection to the laser that looks like this. And what it allows you to do is certainly navigate the laser around. You can change the speed and do a few adjustments. You can also see what is happening from a communication perspective between you and the laser. And you can send commands as well. So if I wanted to send, say, a home command, if I knew the GRBL equivalent of a home command, I could just type it in here and send it. And so that's kind of cool if you're more of a power user. Other things you can do here is you can certainly upload files to an SD card if it's sitting in the laser. And in my case, I have the one that came with the laser sitting in there. So it does have a few images, but you could upload your own. But the other thing that's here, which is actually really, really nice, is all of the manuals. So if you want to find out how things work, you can look at that. Instructional videos as well, which is really interesting. Some software, and both how to update the firmware and also a current copy of the firmware. So if you need to do an update, you can do it from here as well. Last on the list here, which if you're a power user, this is really important. You'll see all of these $ number things here. In GRBL, these are actually variables that you can set, and they help configure the laser. So there's some time you may want to change these. If you want to change the speed that things are going at, you can usually gain access to these either from that command line I showed you here on the main page, or from something like LaserGRBL. You can type in these things. Anyway, this is the online, the Wi-Fi stuff. So let's move on. Okay, we've taken a bit of a look at the laser hardware and a bit of the software, and now it's time to actually put this laser to work. So I normally start with my standard dog photo in Lightburn, and it really is a nice example of a grayscale because it goes from complete white to total darkness, and you get a nice spectrum in between. There's lots of grays in here, which is nice. Most lasers should cut this fairly well, so let's see how the longer Ray5 does. All right, so time to look at some results. I did quite a bit of cutting, engraving. The first one I did was on cardboard, and this is my standard dog picture that I use on cardboard to try out engraving. And the one thing you'll notice, and it's a little hard to see on camera actually as I'm looking at it, but the one thing you'll notice is the output is very contrasty. So normally these edges are more of a grayscale of some sort rather than really dark and then light. And I normally look for the lines in the hardwood floor. He's on a hardwood floor, and this fur on his coat is, you should be able to see some definition there. And in this case, it's just a little kind of too contrasty. So what I did was I reprinted it with a bit less power, and it's definitely a bit better. You can certainly see the lines in the floor, but it's still more contrasty than I would expect, and I don't know why. I tried numerous settings and it just kind of came out that way. So what I did was I printed a powered graph here, and what you'll see, we have 10 to 100% power on the side and varying speeds, increasing speeds on the vertical here. And you can see at high power, it's definitely charring, and you can actually see it burn through the board here a couple of times. This is 3mm Baltic birch. And so very dark, and then there's a very thin line of usable kind of gradient, and then it's light. So I don't know if there's something, you know, wrong with this laser module, or whether it's just the way they've got the software written. It just seems a little more contrasty than I'd expect, but I don't understand why. Anyway, I did just one of their samples. They have a compass on their SD card, and that came out fine. So it's entirely possible that my concern is my own problem rather than the laser. Acrylic, again, translucent, dark but translucent acrylic. Did a great job on my logo, and kind of what I would expect. Same on MDF material. In fact, it did a really awesome job here. This looks great. And then on stainless steel, the way I do these tests is I have a test file, and I try to use the same settings for every laser when I test it. So here you can see some of the previous tests, the Ray5 and the LaserStorm 10, which did a decent job, and pardon the fingerprints here, but it did an okay job. The Ray5, it's a little lighter than the LaserStorm 10, but this is a 10-watt laser. It's kind of on par with the Afero laser, with the Afero 2. You know, it's maybe a little lighter, but again, settings, it may not use exactly the same settings. Now on the cut of a 1/4-inch piece of hard maple, ignore this one. What we're looking at here is, what I did was, and I wrote the settings down, 100% power, 100 millimeters per minute speed, so we're moving really slowly, and 12 passes. This was a lot of passes, and it did cut in, but it didn't cut all the way through, so probably not the best laser for cutting maple. I use this specifically because it's very hard, and it's honestly, it's impressive if it can cut through at all. So the one on the side here is from the LaserStorm 10 that I did previously. So yeah, it's not going to cut through that with any velocity. Now, just for fun, I did this is a piece of Lamicoid I did for some signs I made earlier in a video previously, and I just took some random graphic and stuck it in, and you can see it actually did a pretty decent job. Now, the nice thing about this is, because it's a white background, once you're through the layer on the top, it doesn't really matter how much power you use here. You can really just hammer this, because as soon as you hit the white, it just stops engraving. So it just turns out perfect here. Actually, this is exactly the depth you would want if you were trying to tune this with a CO2 laser, except here you just basically don't have to worry about the settings at all. So anyway, it was just an interesting test to see if I could do it. So that's the outputs. Decent output, other than the concern about the contrast, but like I said, it's entirely possible that is a user problem, not a laser problem, so take that for what it is. Okay, so those are the test results. You can see they look half decent. I mean, it's a usual diode kind of output. The cutting isn't quite as strong as, say, a CO2 laser for sure, but a 5-watt versus 10-watt makes quite a difference. Now, it's probably a good time to take a look at what I like and didn't like so much about this laser. On the pro side, it's definitely well constructed. I mentioned those angle brackets in the corners that make things nice and square and really strong. The control on this laser, the display panel, is better than most. Lots of lasers don't even have a display panel, but this one's kind of in the middle to upper end of the price range, so you would kind of expect it here. And this display, it's a pretty easy to use. The other thing I mentioned there is the built-in Wi-Fi. That's a nice touch. I do think that there's some opportunities they could gain to really separate themselves from the rest of the market if they had full Wi-Fi support. But it is what it is, and there is useful value in there regardless. So last on the pro list here, I didn't talk about this in the video so far, but it has the longer Ray5 has all of the typical safety features you'd expect, bump sensing and tilt sensing kind of features. So anything that happens to the laser that's unexpected, the laser will just power down. So it's not like you're going to have a blue beam flying around your workshop. And you know, safety is always a good thing. Now on the con side, things I think could use a little work. I mentioned in the results in the engraving results, I found, at least on cardboard, the output was a little contrasty. I don't know why. I tried a bunch of different settings, and it seemed no matter what I did, it was either too black or too light, and it just was really hard to get any kind of gray definition in between. So maybe it's just this particular laser module is a little has an issue or something. I don't know, because I haven't seen this happen on a diode laser before. But it seemed most prevalent on cardboard, so maybe it just can't deal with the soft material. Next on the list, it doesn't cut quite as well as some of the other lasers I've tried. Now, granted, this is a 5-watt laser, but I believe it's because the focus here is very tight. There isn't a long band of area where the beam is in focus. It focuses to an incredibly tight beam, so there's very good definition when you're engraving, but that you pay a bit of a price in cutting when you focus the beam down that tightly, because there's a very small region where the beam is actually powerful enough to do significant cutting. So keep that in mind. The focus itself, I mentioned, is a bit awkward. You have to loosen 2 screws, whereas most lasers only have 1. And the actual carriage that the laser module sits on is a bit flimsy, it seems. Plus, if you have this laser in a box of some sort, you end up reaching behind the laser head to do a focus. So it's not quite as easy to use as some of the others, but on the plus side there, it does actually focus really well once you do all that. And once you tighten down those thumb screws, the laser module itself is really tight. It just seems flimsy while you're trying to adjust it. Now, last on this list, and it's a bit of a nitpick on quality, when I plugged the power supply, the power cable into the power supply, nothing came on, and I thought there was something wrong with the laser, but a bit of diagnostics, and I discovered that the power cable that plugs into the wall was actually faulty. I don't know why, and I'm sure Longer just buys these things from a third party, and they probably buy them by the container load, and they just grab one and throw it into the box. So they probably don't certainly test individual ones. So it's just, like I said, it's a bit of a nitpick, but I think it was a bit of a tense moment when I tried to power it up and no lights came on. So that's it. That's my list of pros and cons. All in all, it's a solid laser, definitely constructed well. The display's nice, and it's something that you would be welcome in pretty much any workshop. If cutting is your primary use case, like so many of these diode lasers, this may not be the laser for you, but for the most part, these lasers get used for a lot of engraving, and for that on say plywood, 3mm plywood, or dark acrylic, it does a really nice job. And the beauty of diode lasers over CO2 lasers is you can certainly engrave things like stainless steel, and it does a great job at that. So anyway, that's it. If you're interested in one of these, I'll put a link down below, an affiliate link. If you buy one from there, you'll help the channel. You can go direct to Longer's website as well. And with that, we'll wind the video down. And if the Longer Ray5 is for you, then get out there and buy one and make your world. And I'll see you next time.